Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Wobble Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, sometime later today, it's quite possible that the United States will be attacking Iran. Possible because through the events of the past 48 hours, and in particular through the increasingly unhinged pronouncements of President Trump, it's looking as if we're passing a point of no return. And, those of us old enough are familiar with all the signs of what happens when you pass a point of no return. And that means that you can't now go back and start negotiations or do anything. And so Trump has done this. Today, there are exchanges between Iran and Israel. And the more one, tries to figure out the events really since last Thursday, it's increasing as if that we see that Israel had presented the Trump administration with a fait accompli in the expectation that Trump will take the bait and essentially do what Netanyahu has been seeking to do for many, many, many years, get the United States involved in a war against Iran.
Netanyahu had to go through a lot of presidents to finally get what he
He had
wanted.
to, yes, exactly. And so, the media are doing
Oh,
exactly what
yeah.
they did 20 years ago in the run-up to the Iraq War, having, you know, known that Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction. This was known through the 90s. There was nothing, no new information come along. Suddenly, sometime in 2002, everyone pretended to believe that Saddam Hussein had, despite all the sanctions, despite his complete isolation from the rest of the world, had built up weapons of mass destruction.
And he was the puppet master of Al Qaeda, of all
Yeah,
things.
puppet master. Yeah, right. But I thought he was against Al Qaeda. Wasn't he a kind of secular leader? He didn't like all these Islamists.
Oh,
And
these tricky Arabs.
that's right. Now, what was interesting is that in the interview between Brett Baer and Netanyahu on Sunday was quite revealing because, of course, Netanyahu did his usual thing. Oh, this terrible threat from Iran. But then Netanyahu kind of gave away his little game. So let's just watch a little bit of this interview with Brett Baer.
Mr. Prime Minister, welcome back to Special Report.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Brett.
First of all, let me start at the beginning. Why did you launch this operation now?
Because we were facing an imminent threat, a dual existential threat. One, the threat of Iran rushing to weaponize their enriched uranium to make atomic bombs with a specific and declared intent to destroy us. Second, a rush to increase their ballistic missile arsenal into the capacity that they would have 3,600 weapons a year, new weapons within 3 years, 10,000 ballistic missiles, each one weighing a ton, coming in at Mach 6, right into our cities, as you saw today. And then in 6 years, 20,000. That's no country can sustain that, and certainly not a country the size of Israel. So we had to act. It was the 12th hour. We did act to save ourselves, but also, I think, to not only protect ourselves, but protect the world from this incendiary regime. We can't have the world's most dangerous regime have the world's most dangerous weapons. We're protecting ourselves, but by doing so, we're protecting many others.
I just want to press you on the intel on the nuclear part. Less than 2 months ago, the new director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified on Capitol Hill, saying that everything had been suspended since 2003 and had not restarted, that the nuclear program had not been restarted by the Iranians. So did something change from end of March until this week? Was the U.S. intel wrong?
The intel we got and we shared with the United States was absolutely clear. It was absolutely clear that they were working in a secret plan to weaponize the uranium. They were marching very quickly. They would achieve a test device and possibly an initial device within months and certainly less than a year.
Within months and certainly less than a year. So where's the urgency? You've been saying this for more than 30 years. Within months and certainly less than a year. There's nothing new here. That's exactly what Netanyahu's been saying since 1992. Within months, less than a year. And then he goes on, it's even worse.
Was the intel we shared with the United States. I think we have excellent intel in Iran. I think we've proven that. And that is something that we couldn't possibly accept. Whether it would be 6 months or 12 months or 13 months is immaterial.
Whether it would be 6 months, 12 months, 13 months is immaterial. So that is Netanyahu when he launched this unprovoked attack on Iran. Clearly, there's no urgency whatsoever. It's the same thing he's been saying for more than 30 years. 6 months, 12 months, 13 months, well, who knows? And so he's launched this attack, and now we're in the situation where the United States is about to join Netanyahu in these attacks.
Well, all the more so, George, is that there were negotiations going on.
Fifth round, I think it was scheduled.
Round.
Yeah.
The last I heard, and this is coming from Iran, that they had some new ideas they wanted to express. Okay. Well, that's kind of normal because every time you meet, you try to get closer and closer together. Okay. Well, let's hear them out.
Right.
I mean, what's the urgency?
Right. That's the point.
And I think, that's the point. Go ahead. That's what I was going to say.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I mean, the way we've chronicled this, I think it was the Wall Street Journal article we were going through, and you pointed out the what, the where, the who,
right,
the when, but it didn't go why.
There.
We don't know why.
Good. Yes, we don't know why. And we'll come to a kind of an interesting story that the New York Times did one of these 100,000 word essay doing a kind of instant history, which also doesn't explain the why, but there's a lot of disingenuousness. But the bizarre aspect of it is that it's clear, from January, February, April, and everything else, Trump didn't seem to be very enthusiastic about this project. And then he suddenly, not only does he sign off on it from last Thursday, now he seems to have embraced the most extreme version of this.
It's interesting. Again, this may play before you start.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting the way, because we've been following Trump now for a decade. Okay, so I think we have a lot of empirical evidence in front of us. He doesn't like to follow. He likes to lead. Right. And now we had very incendiary language coming out of Israel, and lie after lie after lie, like Netanyahu. I mean, he's given that speech for 30 years. Okay, it's top of mind for him. But when things start moving, Trump wants to lead the parade, and that's what he's doing right now. Right. Why?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Why? And it's impossible. You think, well, he's the president. He is the president of the United States. Netanyahu is the prime minister of a country with a population of 9 million. It's a very small country. It's smaller than Hungary. And he gets to call the shots in the United States.
Well, George, I mean, I wanted to ask you, I was going to message you earlier today. Maybe I'm not completely up to date right now, but something of this magnitude would warrant a television address to the nation. Is that going to happen? I mean, or is it going to be a truth?
You're right. It's very interesting. I can't remember. I heard somebody saying, "Oh, he intends to address the nation," but has that been scheduled? So the way it's, the way with all the talk is that something could happen at any moment, but there's no plan to address the nation. And I don't even know what he would say would do it.
And
So
maybe that's why he's not going to do it.
I think so. So this was him returning on Air Force One, and here he's asked about what.
I don't have any volume.
Just posted right before we took off that you're not leaving because of a ceasefire. Why are you? Can you elaborate?
We're not looking for a ceasefire. I didn't say I was looking for a ceasefire. That was Emmanuel, nice guy, but he doesn't get it right too often. But we're looking for better than a ceasefire.
That's just what you're going to get into this more. You're not going to. Oh, the U.S. is not the state. You're going to do anything more for Israel right now.
Doing pretty well right now. We're doing pretty well.
We are doing pretty well. We.
Okay, another thing. I don't want to overdo this here. Okay, but why is he not coming out? Okay, I personally, though his rhetoric is bombastic, he doesn't look enthusiastic to me about this. It's very strange. It's a contradiction, okay? I mean, he has to know, at least one person around him has to have said, this may be the most important decision of your presidency.
Right.
Somebody has to have, I hope.
Right.
Okay? But I don't see a lot of enthusiasm here. And it seems like he wants to wind it up, wind it up. Maybe he's tired. I don't know.
I think it's a very good point, because I don't even hear too much from his administration officials. I don't hear much from Rubio. I mean, other than that
That was Friday, George.
exactly that Friday morning that he sent that out. I don't hear much from Hexet. And then, as we'll find out,
and our old buddy Steve, what happened to him?
that's right. But I think that's a good point. He doesn't seem very enthusiastic, given that this could be the momentous decision of his presidency. And yeah, I mean, it's like he's going along with it, and yet, but at the same time, as we'll see, the things he's sending out are more and more incendiary and more unhinged. So here he says, "I'm not looking for a ceasefire." We're going on.
They go too deep into it. They just can't have a nuclear weapon. What do you think about
On the call for Tehran to evacuate, is there a threat or is there incoming? What was the thing about evacuation?
I want people to be safe. And that's always possible. A thing like that could happen. I just want people to be safe.
Is there any concern about U.S. troops or assets in the region?
Look, everything's wrong about this, George. Look, the tongue in his mouth.
Yep.
Well, what's
Yeah,
going on?
I was wondering about that. It looked like he had some food stuck between his teeth, or
Maybe.
but
I mean, again, the language is very bombastic, but he's even kind of cowering. I mean, I'm sorry.
yeah,
It's
no,
not
I know it's very odd. He always does this. He's leaning in the doorway, and taking these questions casually. That's right. It's very odd.
When you say better,
we'll come down so hard if they do anything to our people. We'll come down so hard that the gloves are off so beautifully. Now, I think they know not to take cheap power trips.
Are you sending the vice?
when you say
Do you
better,
plan to send the vice president and Steve Witkoff? There's reports that you want to send the vice president and Steve Witkoff to meet with the Iranians and have discussions. Is that something you're considering?
Actually, I may. Depends on what happens when I get back.
what specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
And then a real end, not a ceasefire. And then
So something that will be
or giving up entirely. Is that okay too? Are you close there? Are you possible? Is that possible? Next 24? Why not? Certainly possible. Complete give up. That's possible. You
Complete give up. Give up what? What's this?
It's so inarticulate
right.
also. I mean, for such a momentous decision to make, or, is this just a casual thing? I'm sorry, George, everything is wrong here. Everything is wrong, the way I look at it.
Yep. That's right. That's right. So here,
Look at that. You froze it out. Look at that expression.
right,
He's like,
right, right. But this give up, he leaves it very vague. Give up what? You mean the Ayatollahs leave power? They leave Tehran? Give up their nuclear enrichment? What does he mean? Give up? I mean, when he says, "Oh, I'm not interested in ceasefire. I want something much bigger." Okay, next question. Well, what do you mean? What do you want? And so when he talks like this, you've now essentially embraced the most extreme Israel agenda. I mean and that's what's emerged really in the last 48 hours. That Trump, first having not been very enthusiastic on this whole venture, has now adopted the most extreme Zionist agenda.
well, he gave it away. We.
We, and then just want to have there what he says about Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, that's already been played elsewhere, but it's interesting just to watch.
You always said that you don't believe Iran should be able to have a nuclear weapon, but how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran
You see that?
building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having.
I got this one on here in this beautiful.
Did you see that?
Yes.
Playing with his tongue.
Yeah.
What's going on?
But it's just, first of all, he says, "I don't care what she said." Well, she's your ODNI. You appointed her. You didn't have to appoint her. You appointed her. She was a Democrat. She came over and endorsed you. You appointed her to that position. He says, "I don't care what she said. I have other sources of information." What sources of information? So you don't believe your own intelligence agencies? Fine. Who is providing you more accurate information? The Israelis? Is that what he's saying? You're suddenly, believing what Netanyahu says?
Well, isn't it interesting? Let's juxtapose what's coming out of the White House on this, and comparing it to the many, many voices coming out of the White House about Ukraine. But now we just have one voice, his.
Yes. Yes.
It's very interesting, very different approach.
Yes. Yes.
And doing this, I've never seen him do that. I've never seen him talk.
I've never seen it though. That's why I thought maybe he's got some food stuck in his teeth or something like that. It was very odd. He's doing that. But
Have you noticed? I guess he's haunted by the frailty of Joe Biden, because he goes up those. He's very grabbed, very careful,
right.
and he's an older man.
Yeah.
I would do that, everyone. I would do that.
Right. No question of that.
I'm not being, what is it, ableist or whatever the term is here. But he's changing. He's definitely changing.
Yeah. And it's a punishing schedule. I mean, there's no question. I mean, being president, it's a very demanding schedule. Meetings, travel, all these news conferences and so on. So yeah, I mean, if you're 78 years old, was he 79? I think he's just been 79.
I think he just turned 79.
Yeah, turned 79. Well, that's older than any president, save for Biden. So yeah, it's
but I guess to kind of wrap it all up, okay, I would think again, George and I have come up with the phrase "the fallacy of common sense." Um, given the magnitude of all of this, I would have thought it would be choreographed in a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's right. This is what George W. Bush did. You see, George W. Bush made it. There was a team effort. You know, he would have these. You'd have these pictures of the team. You know, that he'd be sitting there, and Colin Powell would be sitting next to him, and there'd be
Rumsfeld.
Dick Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, and who was it? Rumsfeld. You know, that the whole team. And so you'd always have that. He'd be posing that it was the team. It's a united team, despite the fact that it was obviously a controversial decision. But as you say, here everything is him. You know, where's Rubio? Where's Hexeth? And you know, none of them seem to have anything to say.
And since Friday, he using his social media, the Truth Social, he's ahead of it.
Right.
He's ahead of everything, which
Right.
is very strange. You would, you know, the Bush example is really important here because you're showing consensus, you're controlling the air, you know, because Condoleezza Rice was on NBC, Rumsfeld was on ABC, you know, this constant, you know,
Right.
getting the message out.
I would have
I don't
exactly.
see any
They all
that
have the
kind of-
same message. They always be getting the same message out. But anyway, what he then did is he did this truth storm, not a Twitter storm, a truth storm, after he got back from Calgary. And then he says here that one of his early messages was Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Now, the thing is that, first of all, I don't know what the deal is, but because I haven't heard that there was ever any deal. And in any case, a deal is a deal. It takes two to make a deal. I mean,
Well, I mean,
anything else is an ultimatum.
Well, there was a U.S. proposal and there was a counter proposal. Then there was a proposal. Okay, so George is absolutely right. There was no deal.
Right.
I mean, unless you say my way or the highway.
Exactly. It's an ultimatum. An ultimatum is not a deal. Yeah. So he has this thing that what I'm not sure about is whether it's clear in his own mind the difference between having a nuclear weapon and nuclear enrichment. Because it seems like he uses the two synonymous. Now, I don't know whether he's confused or whether he's deliberately obfuscating. Because you know, for others, Tom Cotton and the rest of them, they know exactly what the difference is, and they're deliberately obfuscating. I'm not sure Trump is deliberately obfuscating. And then he says everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Why? I mean, what's this? I mean, is he threatening to attack Tehran, or is he issuing threats on behalf of Israel? And what's in Tehran?
Well, a lot of people
are in Tehran. Yes.
And again, you know, we can be accused of overreading it. It's fine. That's what we do here. But that sounds like an attack on the civilian population of Iran.
Yes. It is.
Okay. But so what is it? Is it against the people? Is it against nuclear facilities, military, the Revolutionary Guard?
Right.
Tehran is a huge metropolis, okay? And when there's traffic, it's hard to get in and it's hard to get out, okay?
Right.
So, I mean, that in itself, you know, Trump is not known for being careful with his language, but that's why we're reading this. I mean, it seems to me, what is this, Dresden? You know, a firebombing of Tokyo?
Exactly, because if you read this truth, what he seems to be saying is, well, I've issued you with an ultimatum. If you don't accept this ultimatum, then the people of Tehran had better get out. So in other words, you are essentially threatening the civilians. You're threatening to punish the civilians for their leader's refusal to sign an agreement. That's a war crime. That is a war crime. There's no ands, ifs, and buts about that. That's a war crime. And you threaten to punish civilians, and that's in fact your military operation, just simply punishing civilians for the decisions of their leaders. That's as unambiguous a war crime as it is. So you're right. He's not careful with his words, but any prosecutor would have a nice
Oh yeah,
time with that.
that's evidence.
Yeah, exactly. Just like Hillary Clinton, who again sent out a tweet threatening Gaddafi with death, and lo and behold, a couple of days later, he's murdered. That's it. That's your evidence. You don't need to go beyond that. Anyway, he then sent out. This is something else. This was rather strange. Mike Huckabe, who is this fervent Christian Zionist, evangelical. He's the U.S. ambassador to Israel. He sent out this very odd message, and Trump then retruthed it on his account. So here is the word of Huckabe. Mr. President, God spared you in Butler, Pennsylvania, to be the most consequential president in a century, maybe ever. The decisions on your shoulders I would not want to be made by anyone else. You have many voices speaking to you, sir, but there is only one voice that matters, his voice. So you're telling a political leader that the only thing you need to listen to is the voice of God.
Yeah, but I thought that, one reason to have antipathy towards Iran is that it's a theocracy.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Exactly.
Well, this sounds like a theologian to me.
It does. It's a theocracy. And you think, well, that's exactly why, it's not a good idea to have clerics as political leaders, because they're too preoccupied with all their religious beliefs, and they're, worrying too much about the word of God rather than more secular concerns.
Unfortunately, we will continue with Huckabe.
Exactly, unfortunately. So because it was a long message that he sent out, his voice. Then it says, I am your appointed servant in this land, so this land being Israel, and am available for you, but I do not try to get in your presence often because I trust your instincts. No president in my lifetime has been in a position like yours. Not since Truman in 1945.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Now, this is very...
So get out of Tehran, not since Truman in 1945. Okay.
Right. I trust your instinct. No president in my lifetime has been in a position like yours, not since Truman in 19... Well, what position are you talking about? So basically, talking about Truman, who made that decision to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Japan. I don't reach out to persuade you, only to encourage you. So it's that you have to make this big decision.
And you're encouraging him to do what?
Exactly. Exactly. Encourage you. I believe you will hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else's. You will hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else's. You sent me to Israel to be your eyes, ears, and voice, and to make sure our flag flies above our embassy. My job is to be the last one to leave. I will not abandon this post. Our flag will not come down. You did not seek this moment. This moment sought you. It is my honor to serve you, Mike Huckabe. This all sounds very, very ominous. I mean, he's pretty much telling Trump, you have a religious mission. You have a mission that has been placed upon your shoulders by God. What is this mission? Well, this mission is to do whatever is necessary for the land of Israel. And
including the use of nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
Well, you did not seek this moment. I believe that Trump didn't, but who did seek this moment?
Right.
Okay. A 30-year drumbeat to this conflict, to this day,
That's right.
30-year plus.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Now, Huckabe is a complete fanatic. Because I remember at the time of the JCPOA, and he was accusing Obama of marching the Jews into the gas ovens. The JCPOA was a forced march of the Jews into the gas ovens. That was what Huckabee said at the time.
Yeah, Huckabee, the JCPOA, those were the good days.
And then Trump, went on with his truth storm. It says Iran should have signed the deal. I told them to sign.
Okay,
we
already
we
did
had
this.
that one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Publicity seeking Emmanuel Macron of France mistakenly said that I left the G7 summit in Canada to go back to DC to work on a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Wrong. He has no idea why I'm now on my way back to Washington, but it certainly has nothing to do with a ceasefire. Much bigger than that. Whether purposely or not, Emmanuel always gets it wrong. Stay tuned.
Okay, well, what's going on here?
Exactly. What's going on? Why sending this out?
Yeah, why you do? Is this because you're pissed off with Macron? Well, everybody is. So what's new about that? Okay. And again, the why.
Right.
Why is he leading the parade suddenly?
Right.
Someone passed him the baton.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
I mean,
yep. Exactly.
like he's like, doing this to Macron. Hey.
Right.
I mean, what difference does it make if Macron says he's working on a ceasefire?
Right. But he seems so upset that Macron should have suggested he's working for ceasefire. He said that during that presser on aboard Air Force One. Oh no, I'm not interested in a ceasefire. Why is he so eager to tell the world that he's not interested in a ceasefire? What is that? Why? I mean, whether he is or isn't, why is he so eager to refute any suggestion that there's a ceasefire? Other than, heaven forbid, that he does anything at all that it displeases Netanyahu. Presumably, they're the only ones who really don't want a ceasefire. Others, I mean, some of the Europeans, not all of them, but at least some of the Europeans seem to want a ceasefire. But he said, no, the last thing I want is a ceasefire. And then he goes on, America first means many great things, including the fact that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Make America great again. I still don't get, why is that America first? Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I don't see where that goes. I mean, that's remember, he said before that America first is what I say it is. I created it. Well, of course, he didn't create America First. That was, that goes all the way back to Charles Lindbergh and the America First movement. And then,
or you can even, I saw the campaign button even going all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. So
Woodrow Wilson, yeah, absolutely. And then he was modernized or, brought up to date by Pat Buchanan. I mean, it was Pat Buchanan who actually, essentially brought that term into vogue in the early 1990s, America First. And so suddenly, oh no, I coined the term. And then he goes on. Somebody please explain to Kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, so but this is the talking point that has come out of Israel for 30 years. Right. Why is Donald Trump repeating it over and over and over again?
Right.
And but Tulsi Gabbard said, I don't care what she said. What's going on here?
Right. To say I don't care what she says, she's a member of the cabinet. I mean, it's like saying, well, I don't care what Thomas Friedman said in the New York Times today. Fine, you don't care about what Thomas Friedman. She's a member of your cabinet. She basically puts all that intelligence together and presents it to you. That's the job you gave her. And you said, I don't care what she said.
Why going after? I mean, isn't it kind of beneath you, Donald Trump, to go after Tucker Carlson in this way? Isn't it kind of beneath you?
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry. I think there are other things more important going
Right.
on.
So, and the kooky Tucker Carlson. So it's so lashing out at Tucker Carlson, who incidentally, he obviously disagrees with the policy, but Tucker Carlson insisted in all these interviews with Bannon and always says, "Oh, I really love Trump. You know, he's a great guy, and I'm absolutely convinced that he's a man of peace, and that he's kind of been pushed into this against his will." Tucker Carlson continues to say that, and yet Trump goes after Tucker Carlson in a personal way. He says, "Oh, he's kooky." Tucker Carlson, and then
I don't know if you noticed it, but it kind of turned my stomach. Even Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon had to genuflect to Israel. I love Israel.
oh
I've been
yeah,
there many
yeah,
times.
yeah.
You have to
You have to
genuflect.
genuflect. I love Israel. Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. Um, and this is kooky. And then I think in some interview, or rather, he then said, "Oh, well," because again somebody brought up Tucker Carlson, and he said, "Well, let Tucker Carlson get a network, and then people might pay attention to him." A very mean thing to say, given that you appeared on his podcast at the time when he refused to appear during the debates, and he said, "No, I've got other things to do. I'm going to appear with Tucker Carlson." So now I said, "Well, let him get a network, and then people might listen to him."
Yeah, well, I mean, considering the media environment, if he had a network, probably no one would watch it. But he has a social media presence
That's
that
right.
everyone is aware of. That kind of shows that Trump is kind of slipping a bit.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. Um, and then he goes on, "I have not reached out to Iran for peace talks in any way, shape, or form."
Why do you
This,
have to tell us this?
exactly. It's very, very strange. Here he seems to be completely under, almost like he's a prisoner. He's a prisoner of Netanyahu. It's like, well, this is what the Israeli government want me to say. "Oh, I have not reached out to Iran for peace talks in any way, shape, or form." You're supposed to be the president of the United States. I think most
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean, if it's okay, well, again, we have to use a simple logic game. I have not reached out to Iran for peace talks, so it's war. I mean,
well, that's right. And then he was asked, you remember in aboard Air Force One, somebody asked him, "Are you going to send J.D. Vance and Steve Witkoff to negotiate?" And he didn't seem to dismiss it. He said, "Well, maybe." Now he said, "No, I have not reached out for Iran for any peace talks."
well, looking at these three here, is this what he does all day? I mean, Mr. President, you have an entire apparatus at your disposal to shape your message.
Right,
You're doing it all by yourself, it looks
right.
like.
That's right. This is just more highly fabricated fake news. If they want to talk, they know how to reach me. They should have taken the deal that was on the table, would have saved a lot of lives.
Okay, again, what
The
deal?
the, the deal, the deal. That's right. And then this is the most bizarre of all of his truths.
You know what makes it really bizarre, everyone? Because we all know he isn't a drinker. Okay. If it'd been like, Lindsay at 2:30 in the morning,
Right,
yeah,
right,
he left a scotch bottle
right,
on the table by
right,
mistake.
right.
Okay. But he's not a drinker.
He's not a drinker. No, absolutely right. Now, unconditional surrender, we don't have to go into that. I mean, even back in World War II, that was a very controversial decision. It was taken by Roosevelt. Churchill wasn't happy with it, but Roosevelt essentially presented Churchill with a fait accompli, unconditional surrender. I mean, the reason that Churchill wasn't happy is that, well, now the Germans have no incentive to
Right.
negotiate. The war, it just, keeps the war going, because why would the Germans, try to cut any kind of deal, get Hitler out of the way and whatever,
Yeah,
because
well,
now it's
but
unconditional surrender.
one theory behind that is that he was sending a message to Stalin that they're not going to make a
Right.
separate.
No, I'm sure that's right. But nonetheless, once you insist on unconditional surrender, then you've basically said, well, this war is going to go on until really until the last German. I mean, because now the Germans didn't have any incentive at all for any kind of negotiated outcome.
Yeah, but I mean, again, maybe this is unknowable. Maybe we'll learn one day. Did somebody say to him, but FDR said unconditional surrender. I mean, is he mimicking
Right,
that?
right. Right, I guess so. It's unconditional surrender. Now, but leaving that aside, leaving the aside of the fact that even in World War II, this was a controversial decision. How can you just present that? What have the Ayatollahs done to deserve this? They haven't done anything. You're essentially insisting on this unconditional surrender, the same terms that were demanded of Hitler and the Japanese. I mean, the Japanese at least attacked the Americans at Pearl Harbor. So you can say, well, now I want unconditional surrender from you. But to say, well, I want this from the Ayatollahs, you've been negotiating with them. There was there was supposed to be a negotiation this last Sunday.
Well, I mean, some of the Iranian negotiators over the last few weeks, some of them have already been killed.
Right, exactly. Number of them, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it says, and then he went on. We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding.
Well, it's not so-called. He's called the supreme leader.
That's right. He's an easy target, but he's safe there. We are not going to take him out. And then he puts in parentheses, kill. We know what the term take somebody out means. And we don't really need a kind of
and you don't need to watch The Sopranos to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, at least not for now. So we're not going to kill him, at least not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin. And then thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, so he's threatening Khamenei. And then he says, the two conditions. Okay, we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Now, the shot at civilians, there's a war going on between Iran and Israel. Civilians, may well be hit. First of all, Israel started this. Iran didn't start this. Israel started this. Iran is retaliating. But he's putting the two as the same, killing civilians in Tel Aviv and killing American soldiers, as if the two are kind of interchangeable, and justify taking out Khamenei.
This is what happens when you didn't pay attention in English class. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American missiles, Israeli missiles, or American soldiers. I mean, who's firing what? Okay, obviously he's not talking about killing Americans by American.
No, I think he means, I think he means.
Yeah, well, but I'm just saying it's very, very clumsy.
Oh, well, no, that's right. Yes, but that's very interesting because it's an aspect of Trump, which is, he went to Wharton, very good school, yet he's never really mastered English beyond high school level. And he doesn't speak as an educated person would. I mean, he has this kind of guttural way of speaking. He has a limited vocabulary, and even his sentence construction is very limited. So his writing is pretty much kind of high school English writing. But the fact is that he seems to think that missiles landing on Israeli civilians would justify the United States taking out Khamenei. I mean, even if they were hitting American soldiers, presumably they're not going to hit American soldiers unless Americans decide to get involved in this. But even that wouldn't justify going after the supreme leader, other than, of course, the psychopathic view of Israel's leaders that you can, you basically have carte blanche to kill the leaders of other countries.
Well, you can go back and look at the great theorists of war. You don't kill the leader because you need a leader to surrender.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And you don't. And up until the 20th century, You don't even kill officers,
Right,
okay?
right.
Because the soldiers will become undisciplined, and that's
Right.
when they start pillage and rape and all of that, okay? I
Yeah.
mean, that's one of the reasons why you don't take out the leadership. You need someone to sign something.
That's a very good point. Exactly. You can't very well take out commanders and then complain, oh, that your soldiers committed war crimes. Well, they committed war crimes after you took out the commanders, and now there was no discipline, and the soldiers just went on a rampage. And that's exactly right. You want your commanders there to maintain order and discipline, and as you said, you want the commanders there to arrange a ceasefire. So it's always the bizarre aspect of it. But of course, Israel does it because it doesn't want negotiations. I mean, it's how do you prevent negotiations? Well, you take out
Kill
the
the negotiators.
Our patience is wearing thin. And then thank you for your attention.
Again, our who?
Yes, our exactly.
Is this the royal our me?
Well, that's a good question. What was it we? Because now this we and our seems to be referring to Trump and Israel together, United States and Israel, as if it's one and the same. And this gets even worse. In the next one, he says, we now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. We. I thought this was all done. This was an Israeli operation. So now it's a we. We have.
Well, I mean, if you just if you just read this one tweet, truth, it sounds like there's American planes over Tehran.
That's exactly what it sounds like. Iran has had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than good old USA.
Yeah, but I think most of the technology the Israelis are using is American.
Yes. So those were the truths. And now today, Khamenei did his own Twitter storm, and so the U.S. is entering in this matter is 100% to its own detriment. The damage it will suffer will be far greater than any harm that Iran may encounter. It isn't wise to tell the Iranian nation to surrender. What should the Iranian nation surrender to? We will never surrender in response to the attacks of anyone. That's the logic of the Iranian nation, spirit of the Iranian nation. The U.S. president then threatens us with his absurd rhetoric. He demands that the Iranian people surrender to him. They should make threats against those who are afraid of being threatened. The Iranian nation isn't frightened by such threat. Now, it's kind of what you would expect from him, but what Trump has done by sending all this out, by issuing these threats, is that he still kind of talks about negotiations, a deal, some. Why would anyone now sit down and negotiate anything with Trump?
Well, amazing. We can't resolve this because it was really interesting looking at the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, and oh, by the way, Trump's 79th birthday. We've heard for 10 years about stupid wars, wasteful wars, Biden's wars, Bush's wars, But I'm sorry, it looks like he wants his own war. He wants his own unconditional surrender.
Right.
He saw the jets and the tanks, and is this like a call from history?
Right.
I mean, is this things ain't going well at home? Okay,
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I think maybe I need to take a step back. We did a podcast earlier today, and I'm asking about the importance of psychology because for me, that's what we're kind of left to is trying to understand the psychology of someone because the facts that are presented are non-existent or convoluted or put out of proportion. And
Right.
so, unconditional surrender, obviously that is associated with the Second World War.
Right. But this is the thing with Trump is he proclaimed himself to be a peacemaker. He said that during his inaugural. This is the inaugural on January the 20th of this year. He wants to be known as the peacemaker. But now he wants to be known as the warlord. He wants to be, a kind of Stalin, Churchill, FDR, wearing a uniform, and he's the warlord, issuing commands and ordering armies from one place to another. Well, which is it? You can't be both. And I don't think now maybe he thinks so by continuing to repeat this cliche that Tom Cotton and others, oh, peace through strength, that somehow you can be both a peacemaker and a warlord. So if you threaten others with war and killing and terror, then hey, you're going to make peace. Well, that doesn't happen. A lot of people have tried that. That doesn't happen. If you threaten anyone, they kind of threaten you back, and they go into a defensive crouch. You're not going to bring peace.
Well, I mean,
Carlton knows this perfectly well. You're not going to get peace that way. You're just guaranteeing war.
So let's try to apply this to an historical example. So the Japanese on December 7th, 1941, attacked Pearl Harbor. So we should sit down and negotiate with them.
Right.
Okay. I mean, Trump wants to have a war, but he wants a deal.
Correct.
Well, what kind of deal would it been with the Japanese? Okay, after the attack, and now you want to have a deal?
Right.
Okay. It's very convoluted. It's not a very good example because the United States, Iran has not attacked the United States.
No, that's the thing. Now, the United States, look, United States isn't exactly had clean hands. I mean, the United States did impose an oil blockade. An oil blockade was always going to end badly. I mean, there was Japan had very limited options at that moment.
Oh yeah,
or get out of
absolutely. Okay, my point is you can't be talking about going to war and negotiations at the same time. That's what I'm just trying to say.
That's right. And then Khamenei goes on, the Zionist regime's malicious attack on our country took place at a time when Iranian officials were indirectly engaged in negotiations with the US side. There was no indication on the part of Iran that signaled a military move. That's right. The harm the US will suffer will definitely be irreparable if they enter this conflict militarily. Then he goes on, the Iranian nation also firmly stands against any imposed peace. The Iranian nation will not capitulate to anyone in the face of coercion. The Iranian nation will stand firmly against any imposed war, just as it always had. It was already suspected that the US was involved in the malicious move carried out by the Zionist regime, but considering their recent remarks, this suspicion is growing stronger by the day. So it's an interesting. I mean, the Iranians so far are not taking the bait. They're not doing anything to attack the United States. So they're absolutely still limiting their attacks to Israel. Now, Israel obviously wants Iran to attack the United States. I think Iran is going to hold off. I think they're not going to attack.
I do too.
The Americans.
I do too.
They're going to say it's the Zionists. It's all the Zionist regime. That's our enemy. And they obviously sense the trap that is being set for them. So I think that they're going to hold off. But if they're not able to, if the United States does attack, then it's a kind of an interesting question. What do the Iranians do? Because we don't know at this stage what they have in the tank. What do they have in terms of heavy missiles and the rest? We've seen something, but we don't know what else they have.
And anybody that says they know is a fool. Okay, right. And I've been watching a lot of other people talking. I mean, it's just an unknown. It's just simply an unknown. Okay. Right. My inclination is if the U.S. openly is involved in a military strike using its own air force and missiles from American-controlled bases around the world, then Iran will strike U.S. interests in the region. I think that's obvious. Okay.
I think so because they may just calculate that we've got nothing really to lose at this stage. I mean, you basically you've now declared war on us, and so we don't have anything to lose. And then they may figure that, well, what does American Israel do now? I mean, essentially, how long can you go on bombing? Because sooner or later you're bombing and bombing, and now you're killing lots and lots of civilians, and then you have to wonder how long would public opinion tolerate, a kind of a turkey shoot, killing people in Tehran. I don't think.
Well,
I can't believe they could last more than a few weeks.
Attack and have sunk 2 tankers in the Straits of Hormuz. Okay, what does that mean? Well, if a tanker, 2 tankers, I think it's 28 miles. I think that's the distance passage. Well, they can shut that down. Well, why do I say sink? I mean, really make it difficult to clear. I mean, if you have a tanker that's on the bottom that is obstructing passage of ships, that takes a long time to. First of all, you got to get the oil out. You've got to refloat it. I mean, it takes a long time. It's very, very expensive. And meanwhile, the price of oil goes through the roof. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this threat, it's not like, we're going to put a couple of ships there and make sure no one comes past it. No, they're going to make it impossible to make a passage.
Right. No, and I think it's right. That's what they would do. And then again, the Zionist enemy has made a great mistake and committed a serious crime, and it must be punished. So here, the G7, the coalition of the irrelevant, they're always on hand. Well, can we say something stupid and fatuous, please?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, yes, you can.
And the catering for these clowns is outrageous. Okay.
So this was the G7 leaders' statement. We, the leaders of the G7, reiterate our commitment to peace and stability in the Middle East. In this context, we affirm that Israel has the right to defend itself. Wow, nobody has ever said that. I mean, that is just such an amazing.
But again, this is so telling of their mindset. But Iran doesn't have the right to self-defense.
No. Only Israel. No other country has a right to defend itself. Only Israel. And not only does Israel have it, Israel has the right to decide what is not appropriate in order to defend itself. So if Israel decides to assassinate leaders of foreign country, then Israel is just defending itself. If Israel decides to use nuclear weapons, Israel is defending itself. We reiterate our support for the security of Israel. We also affirm the importance of protection of civilians. Okay. Now, you notice that there's no mention here that, well, who started this? Who launched these attacks? Iran is the principal source of regional instability and terror. So Iran is getting thumped and is the principal source of regional instability and terror. We have been consistently clear that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. We urge that the resolution of the Iranian crisis leads to a broader de-escalation of hostilities in the Middle East, including a ceasefire in Gaza.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Iranian crisis. What does that mean? What is the Iranian? I didn't know
exactly. What is the Iranian crisis?
There's a war going on, but what is the Iranian crisis?
That's right. So that was the G7 statement, and then our good friend Chancellor.
This is one of the most outrageous statements ever made by a post-war. No, I'm sorry. It is the most outrageous statement made by a post-war German chancellor. The most outrageous.
He is really doing his best to get that coveted slot of the second worst chancellor in German history. He's really.
Oh, I think he's wrapped it up. He
says German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has expressed respect for Israel's attack on Iran.
What does it mean to respect it?
Yeah, I respect it. Hey, you know why?
But what does that mean?
Yes, calling it a service to Western allies.
God, this is just outrageous. Oh.
This is the dirty work that Israel is doing for all of us. So this is the dirty work is doing for all of us. So we basically want to do this, but we're too, I don't know, cowardly, pusillanimous, or whatever to do it. So Israel is doing it
Well,
for us.
he's part of the Clean Hand Coalition. You know that.
Yes. But of course, this is exactly what Netanyahu. This is Netanyahu's script. Yeah, well, Israel is doing it for.
Well, you always see that this is the mantra. It's not said so overtly, but it's one of the more subtle things. This is a different part of the world, different types of people.
Right.
The conflicts are played out in different.
Right.
You don't understand. We're in a
Right.
different part of the world.
Right.
We're not in Los Angeles,
Right.
okay, even though they live like they're in Los Angeles. No, it's just like, they're doing, this is their gift to humanity that we
Right.
have to,
Right.
they force us to kill their children, but
Yes.
we're here, we do it.
That's right. That's right. We are also victims of this regime. The Mullah regime has brought death and destruction to the world. I don't get that. How are Germans victims of the Iranian regime? I mean, I don't know. Do you know what he means by that?
I don't have a frickin' clue.
I can only say the greatest respect for the fact that the Israeli army and the Israeli leadership had the courage to do this. They had the courage.
Can you say what it was? Can you say the courage to do this? To do what? To start an unprovoked war?
So
You
here's
respect that? It took courage to do that?
yeah.
I mean, this is just Deutsche Welle. If I'd been your editor, I'd say, maybe you ought to walk this one back here. Okay, no. Okay.
So if we have a German chancellor who says, I have the greatest respect for the fact that the Israeli army and the Israeli leadership had the courage to do this. So he's praising Israel for the courage to launch an unprovoked war. That's a German chancellor. What was it Helmut Kohl said? Henceforth, only peace will emanate from German soil. That's to be one of the most fatuous remarks uttered by any German chancellor.
Well, I think when we're going to have on this podcast, we're going to have a sound drop every time Mertz his name, and I what kind of um, what kind of shouting we could
Right.
have.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Israeli army and the Israeli leadership had the courage to do this. Yeah, that's something very, very.
Well, the Waffen SS would obviously understand this very clearly.
That's right. That's right. We had the courage to do this.
Yes,
That's right.
We had, we had the courage to annihilate the Untermenschen.
The Untermenschen, yeah.
It was a responsibility that was put on our shoulders, and we did the best we could. It's dirty work. Yep, we agree, but. It took courage. The soldiers had courage.
That's right.
To burn down villages and shoot pregnant women and run over children with tanks. It took courage to do.
It took courage. Yeah, that's right. And then he goes on. Mertz said Israel's attacks on Iran could lead to the downfall of the Islamic Republic's leadership. Then and then what? What? That's a good thing. A country collapses into chaos and civil war. That's
that hasn't happened in this century. That's never happened.
Never. That never happened. No. I assume that the attacks of the last few days have already weakened the Mullah regime considerably.
What is this Mullah regime? Well, it's a member of the United Nations. It's called the Islamic Republic of Iran. I mean, you are a public figure. You are a leader of a very important or becoming less important country in the world.
Yes.
I mean, what this kind of flippant commentary?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Mullah regime considerably, and that it is unlikely to return to its former strength, making the future of the country uncertain. He says, smacking his lips. And
smacking his lips and clicking his heels.
Yeah. It's a truly kind of unhinged statement. Iranian officials have reported 224 deaths and so blah blah. So that's Merz, the German Chancellor. So he very, very excited, and doubtless he's providing whatever needs Israel has. He's meeting those needs.
We've been struggling for a nickname for Mertz. I don't know. I'm moving towards Dirty Mertz. Okay. Dirty Mertz, the dirty one. Okay.
That's right.
We're working on it. We're working.
That's right. Now here, this is just to reiterate what it was that Tulsi Gabbard said in her statement, March the 25th, 2025. Because we just want to create a historical record. She was there testifying before the Select Intelligence Committee, and she says the IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons he suspended in 2003. He suspended in 2003, 22 years ago, and he has not authorized the nuclear weapons program. The IC is closely monitoring if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program. In the past year, we have seen an erosion of a decades-long taboo on Iran on discussing nuclear weapons in public, likely emboldening nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision-making apparatus. Iran's enriched uranium stockpile is at its highest levels and is unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons. Now, let's keep in mind, first of all, everyone is free to express their views on the advisability or otherwise of Iran having nuclear weapons. It's having an open debate, and you can absolutely have a very strong argument in favor of having nuclear weapons, given that your main enemies in the world, Israel and the United States, both have an abundance of nuclear weapons. So it does make sense to have your own.
I think it's pretty obvious that if Iran had nuclear weapons, it wouldn't have been attacked last Friday.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think North Korea has shown that no one messes with a country that has nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but but so much of what we've seen, and of course, let's look at the two principles first, Iran and Israel. They are in a state of war with one another. What comes out from those two governments, you take with a pinch of salt. Okay, I don't know. The three ballistic missiles ended up in a field. That's what the Israelis said. Okay, whatever. Okay, I guess maybe. I don't know. Okay, and the same thing with Iran saying the same. They have a heavy censorship there as well. Okay, right. What's important here is that when we look at this here, there's no examination of the strategic environment. Israel has nuclear weapons. I saw it today. I don't know who said it. It was some former official said that it's just a given. If you work for the U.S. government, you could never admit that Israel has nuclear weapons. Okay.
Well, that's
But the whole point here. Okay, now I know what I wanted to say. If you look at the original attack, it's for regime change. It's not. See, Iran must not have nuclear weapons. And Trump it's got like tattooed on his forehead right now. Okay, but that's not what this is about. It's not this. It's not about this at all.
No, that's right. That's absolutely right. But Israel's having nuclear weapons is, of course, itself very interesting, because Israel is the only country in the world that is allowed to have nuclear weapons and is allowed not to admit that it has nuclear weapons, which means that nobody actually knows what Israel has, what kind of weapons and what kind of level of readiness. Nothing. No one else. Everyone else has to declare what they actually have. But Israel, gets away with this ambiguity. Why would Israel be allowed this ambiguity? Oh, well, we're just being playing all coy. Oh, maybe we have, maybe we don't. I mean, and so why? What? I mean, it's a serious business if you have nuclear weapons. I think everyone should know what you have.
Well, I mean, Alan Dershowitz stepped in it. It was a couple of weeks ago. Someone asked him in a podcast, well, what about a one-state solution? He said, well, I don't know if we could allow any kind of Arabs to have control of the nuclear arsenal. He just blurted it out. I mean, if he was my defense lawyer, you're fired. Okay.
Yes, yes. Um, and then this was from the report, the Tulsi Gabbard's report. Same thing. We continue to assess. Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and that Khamenei has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003, though pressure has probably built up on him to do so. In the past year, there has been an erosion of decades-long taboo on discussing nuclear weapons in public that has emboldened nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision-making apparatus. Khamenei remains the final decision-maker over Iran's nuclear program, to include any decision to develop nuclear weapon. And then it says, Iran very likely aims to continue R&D of chemical and biological agents for offensive purposes. Iran military scientists have researched chemicals and have a wide range of sedation, dissociation, and amnestic incapacitating effects, and can be lethal. Yeah, okay, so basically you've got the consensus, and has been a consensus within the US intelligence community, that there's no nuclear weapons program. So why is the president of the United States says, oh, they're very close to having nuclear weapons? Where did you get this from? Who told you this?
Well, I mean, it was interesting. Trump, when he met Putin was it in Iceland?
Helsinki?
Helsinki,
yeah.
sorry. And it was it was about a question was asked about Russia. So you don't trust your own intelligence community?
That's right.
Remember that?
That's
but you don't trust. Oh, okay. So
right.
Donald Trump, you don't trust the intelligence community?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it's very that analogy is very interesting, because at the time everyone attacked Trump. Oh, you don't believe your own intelligence agents who told you about the Russian interference in the 2016 election. But no one's attacking Trump now. They're saying, hey, yeah, Iran's close, and basically, yeah, Tulsi got it wrong, well, that's it. So suddenly it's okay to doubt your own intelligence services.
Again, it's been, in my entire lifetime, if you look at popular culture, but the Israelis do it better. They seem to know more than we do. I mean, Israeli intelligence, top notch in the world, clandestine. But the Israelis are involved in it. This has been cultivated,
Yes. Right.
And it's everywhere. Yeah. It's everywhere.
Right.
He's my new bodyguard. He was Israeli IDF. Oh, okay, yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere, and I suspect that Israeli intelligence isn't that great. Their great successes, all the successes, come from information that's passed on to them by the Americans. I think it's the Americans who, I'm sure, know where everyone lives in Tehran. It's the Americans know all the home addresses and phone numbers of everybody. But it's obvious the Americans is much better for them to have the Israelis claim the credit. Yeah, we had nothing to do with the Israelis. They haven't been very successful.
And the Israelis like taking credit because then they have impunity.
They have impunity.
What works?
Right.
See how it works?
Yes. Yeah. So they haven't been very good with their intelligence with Hamas.
Well, I mean, George, it goes back to a podcast we did earlier together. And we talked about you can go all the way back to Camp David, knocking out the Egyptians, knocking out the Jordanians, and then get a bloody nose with Hamas, speed it up to the present. Okay, Hamas is on the back foot. The destruction of Syria. Okay, win on the roll. But the question is, and I don't have the answer, but I think it's something worth talking about. Does any and all of this make Israel a safer country?
Well, I don't
Does
think
it,
it does.
and it doesn't bring security to
No,
the
it
region.
doesn't,
Okay.
and that's why it's very limited as to what they have accomplished. It's still very hard to see what exactly they've accomplished in Gaza. They're still nowhere near to resolving anything in Gaza. I mean, that's a war that looks like it's just going to continue. By using their own numbers, it seems that they haven't really eliminated Hamas at all. So
Well,
that's
and
just going to
George,
continue.
unfortunately, because there's just so many hours in the day and so many hours you can focus on something, but it's hundreds every day
Right.
dying and trying
Yeah.
to get food. It's
Right.
not bombing anymore. It's
Right.
just killing people trying to get aid, either starve
Right.
or risk the possibility of being shot. And there's this, and even I've looked at Middle East media outlets and that have been very focused on what's going on in Gaza,
Right.
but this war with Iran is just taking all the
Right.
front page.
That's right. That's right. But this is really where we're getting into the interesting question, which is why is the United States getting involved here? What's the rationale? Um, I suspect, and it may be that Trump has been told by his advisors that Israel's situation is not that great. It's still got fighting this war with Hamas, and it has a limited number of missiles or interceptor missiles that it can go on fighting with Iran. And unless the Americans come in a big way on behalf of Israel, this could be a very, very difficult
Well, I mean,
crisis for Israel.
the economy is stopped. And literally, it just stopped. Basic
Right.
services, get food and water.
Right.
Brownouts, blackouts going
Right.
on. Okay, the country is very polarized on other issues. On
Right.
this, they seems to have consensus. But
Right.
this is the first time of this magnitude. Okay, of course, last year we had the exchange with Iran, but this is full blown.
This is full blown.
And people are, if you got a private yacht, you're heading out to Cyprus right now.
And
Okay.
so you have this, right? So Israel population 9 million, Iran population 90 million. Never a good idea to take on a country 10 times your size. I mean, that's always that's going to be quite a difficult one. But if Iran has something in the tank, and Iran does have an extensive ballistic missile capability, then Israel only has a limited number of interceptor missiles to take out. And so that could be one of the reasons why there's this pressure that's building on Trump to get into this war on behalf of Israel. Because if Israel can just take care of Iran and say, oh, okay, that's it, let's leave Israel to it, there's a lot of bluster. Oh, Israel can take care of itself. I'm not at all sure that's what the American, the military intelligence chiefs are saying. Israel can take care of itself. And
Well,
so I think that's, yeah.
don't you think the lobby would turn on Trump in a heartbeat?
Right.
You allowed the second Holocaust. Oh,
Right.
could you imagine? Can you imagine?
Right.
Can you imagine?
Right.
I mean, this is one of the, this is what makes it so dangerous, everyone, is that the powers that be in the West cannot allow Israel to lose.
Right.
You cannot allow Israel to suffer a strategic defeat.
Right.
And it is just as much the DNA in the West as it is in Israel, maybe expressed in different ways.
No, I think that is right. So you have, first of all, as things stand, Israel has not taken out Iran's nuclear program. That still seems that's intact, and they haven't taken out Iran's leadership, and we just don't know how much Israel can take. I mean, Israel's been fighting a war now since what was 23, so it's now almost 2 years. Non-stop, Israel has been waging war. I don't know how long Israel can go on like this. And now you're having struggling already with Hamas. Now you're taking on Iran, country 10 times your size. It's I think.
Well, I mean,
let's
flip the script because it just shows the way of thinking. Again, we talked about this earlier, is that we always have to react to the narrative that is presented to us. They don't necessarily have to react to
Right.
us. But what does a strategic defeat mean for Israel? Does that mean the end of Israel itself?
No.
A regime change there?
Right.
Retreat from Gaza? I mean, these things are never even brought up. Okay, that's why. And this is again maybe goes into psychology, is that Israel embarked upon an existential endeavor.
Right.
But they have created created the paradigm of to be or not to be.
Right. Well,
Okay,
yeah.
but Iran doesn't go nearly that far for Iran. Iran, George and I remembered the war they had with Iraq. I mean, they took enormous casualties, and the war of the cities and all of that. I mean, it's one of the bloodiest modern military campaigns in history that virtually nobody knows about.
Right. But that's the thing. But at that time, Iran was much weaker and wasn't really able to defeat Iraq. Um, but this time, I mean, Iran. I think if Iran survives and everything survives, they don't give up their nuclear program. Then you'd have to say, well, Israel has failed. Israel has failed in its objectives, and therefore Trump will have failed. Because Trump, for no reason, no obvious reason, has thrown the weight of the United States behind Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, it's so puzzling because common sense isn't allowed into the conversation. Okay.
Right.
They must not have a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's the beginning and the end of the whole conversation. But that's, first of all, it's quite meaningless to what's going on right now, is that, this is something George and I talked about a few months ago, is that look at the campaign against Hamas. Well, if you think about it, it's a regime change operation, okay? And what adds to it is extermination and displacement, okay? Regime change in Beirut, regime change in Damascus. They're treating Iran in the same fashion, regime change,
Right.
okay? And the beepers and all of that, and maybe that's something that the Israelis have up their sleeve. We don't know. Okay.
Well,
One thing is for sure. One thing is for sure is that Iran is a sieve. I mean, people seem to be able to
right. No,
get.
that's right. And I think, look, I think it's quite possible that sometime within the next few days they will assassinate Khamenei and other Iranian leaders. I don't think that's going to bring the regime down because
No.
first of all, I don't think Khamenei is necessarily such a commanding
Yeah, I
figure.
mean, so you kill the Pope and the Catholic Church collapses. Come on.
Exactly. I mean, look, they withstood the death of Khomeini. Khomeini died in 1989, so that's already more than 30 years ago. And Khomeini was Khomeini. I mean, he had real stature. Khamenei doesn't have any of that kind of stature. So, you can kill Khamenei, you can kill his deputies. That doesn't mean that the regime will disintegrate. So I think that is probably coming because Israel likes doing that. But anyway,
But George, so what is the calculus here? Is it the threat and the hope on the part of the Israelis that the Americans will come in and they hope, and that threat will be the determining thing. Okay, fine. Oh, fine. We give up nuclear.
Yep.
We give up the energy cycle. If that's what their calculation is, they're fools.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's the calculation that exactly the Americans come in and
No, the threat of coming in.
Well, no, but look, I don't think the threat's going to be enough. I mean, you have to. I think at this stage, I think the Americans have to go beyond the threat. I think the Americans have to start attacking because the threat, obviously, just from those messages that Khamenei sent out, they're not moved by threat. But if the Americans start attacking, the calculation I think of Israel is that the Tehran leaders will say, we can't take this. We're ready to sign a deal with J.D. Vance and Witkoff whereby we give up everything. In other words, the John Bolton program, income the trucks, income all the transport aircraft, everything is dismantled, all the centrifuges, everything, packed into American transport aircraft and flown out of the country. And now I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think Iran's going to agree to that, because I think if they did agree to something so humiliating, I think that would be the
That would
of the
topple the
end.
regime.
That would be exactly. Whereas if they just simply sit on their hands, wait out the Americans, I think they have a shot, because I'm not sure American public opinion or European public opinion is going to tolerate a prolonged bombing campaign of Tehran.
That's why I think why I brought up the regime change scenario, because again, we hear Iran is weak, this is our window of opportunity, all of these things that we hear
Yeah,
is that, I mean, if that's it, then the Israeli gambit has already failed.
right,
Okay. And now we go into who knows where,
right.
everyone. I remember 2003 like it was yesterday. Okay. It's going to be a walk in the park. It'll
Right.
pay for itself. I mean, and what happened was the law of unintended consequences kicked in. I have every reason to believe the law of unintended consequences is going to kick in again.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's
But it doesn't mean Iran's going to come out good in this.
no, but
No,
Iran. No, that's the thing. But Iran only has to survive a bombing
exactly.
campaign, because if you go back to, say, the bombing of Yugoslavia, okay, no boots on the ground, but you get bombing, and now the problem arose there is that after a while you're suddenly running out of things to bomb, and Serbia was just simply not surrendering, and that was a real problem, and so they had to cut a deal with Milosevic. Of course, they lied and then they betrayed Milosevic, but they had to cut a deal because there's increasingly no targets left to bomb. And I think that's going to happen here. If they can't, take out any of Iran's nuclear capability, and it's far from clear that the Americans, even with their bunker buster bombs, can do this, then what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to just keep bombing Tehran? That's not going to fly.
Well,
That's going to become very unpopular.
and the difference with when you bring up the former Yugoslavia is that Iran can hit American
Right.
personnel. And because why? Because Iran is surrounded by American personnel and bases,
Right.
and they're very vulnerable. Look, if an American F-35 is flying over Tehran with an American pilot from an American aircraft carrier, Iran will attack the bases around it. I mean, that's just common sense. Okay, war is war.
Yeah, that's right. But again, just a quick refresher. It is important that the report from the IAEA at the end of May, said the agency has no credible indications of an ongoing, undeclared, structured nuclear program of the type described above in Iran, and notes the statements of the highest officials in Iran that the use of nuclear weapons is incompatible with Islamic law. However, repeated statements of former high-level officials in Iran related to Iran having all capabilities to manufacture nuclear weapons continue to provide concerns in the area. I don't know what concern is. Why do we care what former high-level officials said? I mean, they're
Yeah,
former.
well, a judge would say that's hearsay, inadmissible.
I think so. But that's the IAEA. That's their report. The one that the British, the French, and the Germans.
Pounced. They pounced.
Oh,
They
we have to
pounced on.
exactly pass a resolution condemning Iran, and then this is the again, this is more of that report, and then J.D. Vance had felt that he had to weigh in to present a more eloquent, or at least a more articulate expression of the Trumpian position than Trump has managed to do. So it says here, look, I'm seeing this from the inside and am admittedly biased towards our president and my friend, but there's a lot of crazy stuff on social media, so I wanted to address some things directly on the Iran issue. First, POTUS has been amazingly consistent over 10 years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Over the last few months, he encouraged his foreign policy team to reach a deal with the Iranians to accomplish this goal. The president has made clear that Iran cannot have nuclear uranium enrichment. And he said repeatedly that this would happen one of two ways, the easy way or the other way. Now, right away, you have to say, and this is very important, and we keep repeating it, it's perfectly legal for any state to enrich uranium on its own territory. That's not prohibited by the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So where does the United States get the right to demand that a country doesn't have the right to enrich uranium? You could say, it should be under IAEA supervision. That's fine, to make sure that it's not being transferred into a weapons production. That's fine. But enrichment is permissible under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And then he goes on, second, I've seen a lot of confusion over the issue of civilian nuclear power and uranium enrichment. These are distinct issues. Iran could have civilian nuclear power without enrichment, but Iran rejected that. I wonder why it did that.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I wonder why. That's a head scratcher. Maybe because it suspected that the moment it agreed to that, it would be denied any access to nuclear power.
Yeah, because we can't force people to export it to you.
Yeah, sorry. It's just not up to us. Love to help you. Meanwhile, they've enriched uranium far above the level necessary for any civilian purpose. Why did that happen? That happened because your boss and your friend walked out of the JCPOA when there was no need for him to do so. He never really explained why he walked out of the JCPOA.
Just a bad deal.
It was a bad deal. But Iran was adhering to the JCPOA, so still no explanation. Why did he walk out from that deal? Meanwhile, they've been found in violation of their non-proliferation obligations by the IAEA, which is hardly a right-wing organization. Well, in the first place, that's the argument that was used against Saddam Hussein. Oh, he's in violation of the UN Security Council resolutions. Okay, well, let's say he is. Where do you get the right then to use force in order to enforce the UN Security Council resolution? So even if the IAEA says, yeah, they're in violation of their obligation, okay, well, then you go refer this to the United Nations and then see what the United Nations decides. You don't get to say, well, we're going to enforce the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's up to us to enforce it.
And JD, yeah, they are distinct issues. If enrichment does not mean it's going to go through the entire fuel cycle. JD, you're even saying this yourself.
Right.
But now you conflate them.
Right. That's right. That's right. And so basically, they've done nothing wrong. You still haven't presented a case that Iran has done anything wrong. There was no deal.
And also, everyone, this is the quote unquote case of the IAEA. What's Iran's case?
Exactly.
We don't know.
Exactly, because Iran,
and they're not interested.
You're absolutely right, because Iran has rejected the findings of the IAEA because they said, hey, this goes back to accusations from more than 20 years ago. And those accusations from more than 20 years ago were based on material provided to you by Israel. You're just regurgitating Israel accusations from 2003. So Iran rejects it. That's it. So you say IAEA, but Iran rejected the findings of the IAEA. It's one thing to want civilian nuclear energy. It's another thing to demand sophisticated enrichment capacity. No, a number of countries have enrichment. Japan has enrichment.
Brazil has enrichment. Germany has enrichment.
Yeah, that's right. But what is amazing is that here's J.D. Vance, whose entire reputation for, the meteoric rise of J.D. Vance, I mean, that is meteoric. He's not even 40 years old. All based on the fact that he was sent into the Iraq war on the basis of lies. We were lied into that war. George W. Bush lied us into the war, me and my comrades. We were lied into the war. We were sacrificed on these lies. And now you're regurgitating the same lies which were exactly the same, word for word. Oh, Saddam Hussein is in violation of UN Security Council resolution. Not that you have any evidence that he has weapons of mass destruction. He's just in violation of UN Security Council
Also, the
resolution.
IAEA,
Therefore, we should just simply invade Iraq.
the IAEA lied then, but it's not lying now.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So you haven't made any case here against it. You say maybe it's in violation of some obligation, and that justifies an armed attack, justifies all the killing, because of that it may or may not be in violation of its obligation on the non-proliferation. It's exactly the same. And this is what your reputation, or your whole reputation, oh, we were lied to into that war.
And you're both at the negotiating table.
Yes. But it was the same thing, right? Because remember, Saddam Hussein was cooperating with the weapons inspectors. I mean, they'd come into Iraq. Hans Blix, who led the inspectors, says Iraq is complying with UN Security Council resolutions. Everything that we want to see, we're seeing. But one thing we're not seeing any evidence of a weapons of mass destruction program. And the Americans said, well, we're not interested in anything Hans Blix has to say. We're just going in anyway. So it's exactly the same thing. You don't have any evidence that there's any kind of a nuclear weapons program, but hey, let's just bomb them. It's one thing to want civilian nuclear energy. It's another thing to do that. And it's still another thing to cling to enrichment while simultaneously violating basic non-proliferation obligation and enriching right to the point of weapons-grade uranium. No. Until you actually weaponize your nuclear material, you're not doing anything. You have no basis for declaring that what level of enrichment you can go up to. Besides, and under the JCPOA, it went up to 3%. That was 3.25% or whatever it was.
And JD, as kind of an aside here, what did Tulsi Gabbard say?
That's right. Your colleague, yeah.
What did she say?
Right, exactly. And then he goes, and then this is what the non-proliferation treaty says, affirming the principle that the benefits of peaceful application of nuclear technology, including any technological byproducts which may be derived by nuclear weapon states from the development of nuclear explosive devices, should be available for peaceful purposes to all parties of the treaty. So not only is
So here's the threshold, everybody.
Nuclear weapon states have an obligation to help non-nuclear weapon states to develop their civilian nuclear energy potential. They have an obligation. They have to actually make this technology available. And then here again it says, nothing in this treaty shall be interpreted as affecting the inalienable right of all the parties to the treaty to develop, research, production, and use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. And then and so on. So what he's saying here is just simply flat out wrong. It's a flat out misinterpretation of the non-proliferation treaty. And then going back, I have yet to see a single good argument for why Iran needed to enrich uranium well above the threshold for civilian use. Well, one argument could be that essentially they were trying to apply pressure to return to the JCPOA and say, hey,
exactly.
You're getting the wrong outcome. You wanted...
Yes, everybody, I'm really glad George brought it up, because I've talked to our friend Professor Morandi, which we'll have on later in the week. I talked to him about that, and he said, "No, we went down the path of this research just to get sanctions relief. That's all we wanted was sanction relief.
Right.
That's all.
That's right. That's it.
So that was their bargaining chip.
That's it. It was the bargaining chip. Hey, you wanted to stop us enriching uranium. We stopped enriching uranium. Now you walked out from the treaty. Well, this is the consequence of your walking out from the treaty. We're now enriching to a higher level than before, the exact opposite of what you were trying to achieve. Therefore, it makes sense to return to the treaty.
Even if you have it's 60 and above, okay, I'm not a physicist, but that's when you can start weaponizing it. Okay, you have 60. Are you weaponizing it? No, there's
Exactly, there's no
evidence that
evidence
we're
for that.
weaponing it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's saying, oh, we're well above the threshold for civilian use, but there's no evidence that it's being in any way being used for anything other than civilian
But you
purposes.
can't trust the Iranians. See, that's what it always gets down to.
That's right.
But you can trust Israel.
That's right. You can trust Israel.
Because what? Because they're Western colonial settlers? Because they look like us?
I don't know what I don't know what the because there are plenty of people who look like us that the Americans don't trust. But for some reason, they trust the Israelis. I've yet to see a single blah blah in violating it. I've yet to see a single good pushback against the IAEA's findings. But even if it's in violation of non-proliferation, what's happened now is Iran is under attack. It's under military attacks. People are getting killed, and you haven't provided any reason, any justification at all for the killing. And Trump, your boss, is threatening the United States to get into this war.
I have yet to see a single good pushback against the IAEA's findings. Yeah, it's axiomatic. You just accept it. You don't interrogate it. Has anybody seriously interrogated what the IAEA has found?
Right.
No.
No.
It's a one-liner. Oh, we got the bullet points.
Right.
They're not in compliance.
Right.
Nobody's interrogating the
Right.
IAEA. Grossi, the guy that runs the outfit, this guy is compromised from
Yes.
as long as the day is from
Right.
sunrise to sunset. I
Right.
mean, there's ample evidence. He just brings everything the IA finds and they just give it to the Israelis.
Right.
They're partisan. They're
That's right.
nonpartisan. I
That's
mean,
right.
they are an important element to Israeli and American intelligence.
That's right. That's right. And even Grossi said it's not a great idea to attack nuclear facilities. Kind of a dangerous thing to do.
Wow, wow. Who would have thought that a guy from the IAEA would say such a thing?
Meanwhile, the president has shown remarkable restraint in keeping our military's focus on protecting our troops and protecting our citizens. Remarkable restraints, he says, unconditional surrender. And then he may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president. And of course, people are right to be worried about foreign entanglement after the last 25 years of idiotic foreign policy. How is this not idiotic? I mean, that's the thing, you're supposed to, yeah, that's okay. You don't, because that's over. No one's arguing about Iraq anymore, so that's okay. But we're getting into the next war. It doesn't, it's stupid to argue about the last war. The last war's done. That's over, done. It's the next war that we have to argue about.
He's justifying the next idiotic war.
Right. But I believe the president has earned some trust on this issue, and having seen this up close and personal, I can assure you that he is only interested in using the American military to accomplish the American people's goals. Whatever he does, that is his
But
focus.
what is the goal here? What is the American people's goal?
I don't think that the American people, I haven't seen any polls suggesting the American people are enthusiastic about going to war against Iran. Now, that's at the moment. If the war starts, they're going to start asking different questions, and the poll numbers will suddenly, whoa, American people are overwhelmingly in support of this war. But at the moment, given the question that is asked, do you think we should get involved in this war between Israel and Iran? The overwhelming said, no, we shouldn't.
Well, that's why he sent out those tweets.
Right.
Because the wind isn't to their back on this one.
Right.
And again, I don't want to over stress this, but the way this has been marketed, wow, very opaque,
Right.
in my opinion.
It's very, and it would be very interesting if he were to make this presentation before the American people, what kind of a case he would make. I don't think he'd be able to make any kind of a case. And usually, when presidents have done that, they've spectacularly failed. Because when Bill Clinton, did try to justify the bombing of Yugoslavia, he put in a whole lot of ridiculous things that even New York Times said, well, blaming Serbia for World War I and World War II is kind of stretching history a little bit. I mean, and that's the New York Times. And then when Obama justified the attack on Libya, who hadn't done anything to the United States, it was also rather pathetic. So Trump would certainly be moving in the long tradition of totally idiotic explanations as to why this is happening.
Yeah, but see, what would be different there, given the context that we have today, is that can he make a reasonable case to the MAGA base? I don't think he can.
I don't think so.
I don't think he can.
I don't think so.
I mean, because the New York Times, they'll, whatever failings there are, even though they're probably very for his war, okay? I mean, that must be really tough for those editors over there. They passionately hate Trump, but they're doing something that they've been all wishing for 30, 40 years. That'll be an interesting watch.
It's very interesting, but that raises the interesting question, which is he loses his base.
But he gains.
He gains, but he gains the support of people who hate him,
Yes.
who will seize the first opportunity to knife him and to destroy him. I mean, New York Times hates you. They're not going to go, to bat for you. Also, but you're losing your base. The people who were ready to go into bat for you and to die for you, you're losing them. That's not a good swap to get the New York Times and the CNN onto your side. The moment you're in trouble, they're going to pounce.
And that would be ephemeral. It would be ephemeral.
It's absolutely ephemeral. Yeah, no, those aren't your allies.
Don't trust these people.
No. I mean, I think it's clear from the voices of the base, they are very unhappy about all of this. And I think that they're particularly unhappy because this was Trump's calling card. This was his selling point. Ever since he came down that escalator, 2015, he was always, oh, I'm the peacemaker. Oh, we're not going to get into any more of these stupid wars in the Middle East. No more. When he went to Riyadh, no more nation building. No more color revolutions. Yeah, people don't like being lied to. People don't like being made to look like fools.
Well, and considering this isn't going to help with energy prices around the world, including inside the United States,
right.
And and the rest of his agenda is stalling. Okay, and I'm being generous here. I mean, this is a very weird, perfect storm that could work against him.
Yep.
And I want to see the average people succeed because that's what they voted for. They want. They want a change.
Right.
They want something, but they're not getting the change that they voted for.
No.
Okay.
No.
And it's a truism. Americans don't vote on foreign policy. Well, a war of this magnitude will impact everyone in the world one way or another. Okay. You can't ignore this,
Right.
and you can't compartmentalize this.
Right.
Compartmentalize this.
Right. Yes. Yeah,
I don't know, Church. So here we are Wednesday. I don't know how many hours we've talked since Friday. I don't think we've made any progress here.
No, I don't think so. And we haven't made any progress because we still can't figure out
why
exactly Trump has done this when there was no reason for him to do so. This wasn't high on his agenda. No one had thought that this was an important part of his campaign. He barely mentioned Iran while he was campaigning and seemed to suggest that this would be a relatively easy thing to accomplish. And now, less than 6 months into his presidency, he's got a terrible crisis on his hands.
George, a few short weeks ago,
yeah,
you and I said, this is doable.
This is doable.
It's doable.
It's an easy one. It was an easy one. and so he now got himself into this on account of someone else, on account of somebody that he already knew, like
It's duplicitous.
Netanyahu, because he remembered Netanyahu from his first term, and when they were together, they were going to kill Soleimani, and then Netanyahu kind of left Trump to carry the can, and Trump made a point. Hey, look, Netanyahu just left me to carry the can. So he knew all about Netanyahu, and then he's gone ahead and allowed him
Okay,
do this.
everybody, there's the why question. I don't have the answer, okay? But the why is something that we're not being told,
No.
at least being told directly,
No.
okay? Now we can surmise. Again, I do a nice little review of what everybody else is saying. He's being blackmailed. They've got something on. George and I are not going to go that far because we have no reason
There's
to
no
say
evidence. There's no evidence for it.
no evidence,
No.
okay? But it's galling and it's in your face.
Right. Yeah.
Why?
Right. Exactly. Well, maybe we'll find out more in the coming days, but I don't think so. I mean, I'm not at all sure we are going to find out much more. But it leaves us baffled. As you say, we talk hours and hours and hours, and we still don't understand what exactly happened. We looked through those truths sent out by Trump, and we're still puzzled. Like, why would he do this? Why would he essentially jeopardize fatally his own presidency in this way? To do that which he always said he wasn't going to do.
You don't recover from something like
No, you
this.
don't.
You can't
No.
undo it.
Yeah.
Can't undo it.
No.
And then the law of unintended consequences kicks in. You have no idea. I mean, I think we heard it earlier, as all this is going on. Well, Turkey and Azerbaijan, well, let's finish our business with Armenia. That's happening right now. Okay, all over the place.
All right.
All right, we're going to leave it at that. With our search for why. We will continue, okay? And we have some good guests
We
coming
have
up
some
later.
guests coming up later this week, so we've got a full calendar. So kind of special guests. So
and I have a little bit of personal good news for everyone. I've made a complete recovery with my eye surgery. As of today, absolute 100% successful recovery.
Very good. Well done. Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, everybody, this is Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. This is Wednesday, and we're just getting started.
Only in the middle of the week.
It's amazing how these days,
Yes.
On the one hand, they're like they never end because there's so much news flow, and then it was like, God, we were talking about this. We were talking in a completely different world 1 week ago.
That's right. It was a different world. Yeah, exactly. So tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, join me for my live stream. As I say, we've got special guests coming this week. And in the meantime, you've got to think about the dogs, because there's a lot of news flow. We're doing all this heavy lifting. We're going hungry. And we need something in the tip jar. This business model of the no tip jar, that's not working for us.
Give me a burger today and I'll pay you on Tuesday. It doesn't work.
Exactly. That doesn't work. So, they understand economics. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we'll get more of these lectures on business modeling from the dogs. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.